Hello and welcome. Thank you for briefly lending us your eyes and ears to present you with an important issue within the food industry. Today, we will be focusing on the UN's Sustainable Development Goal 12, responsible production and consumption. In terms of the contents for this presentation, as the SDG is quite broad, we'll highlight our focus targets first. After that, we'll discuss two key issues within food supply chains in the context of responsible consumption and production. Finally, we'll discuss solutions for these key issues. As we've said before, SDG is about responsible consumption and production. The issue here is that the global material footprint is increasing, and therefore depleting our planet of its natural resources unsustainably, as you can see in the infographic by the UN. You can also see that the UN highlights another issue at the bottom of the infographic, namely high rates of food loss in supply chains. Although SDG 12 has many targets, we will be focusing on how retailers can contribute towards the following. Target 12.2, which is about the sustainable management of natural resources. Target 12.3, which is about food waste and loss reduction. And Target 12.5, which is about reducing waste through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse of materials, which is in our case, food. The first topic we will discuss is the level of carbon emissions the food industry produces. This topic will be the focus of Target 12.2, as carbon emissions are not only a result of the way we use natural resources, but are also a danger to our natural resources. To highlight the severity of the environmental impact caused by the food industry, and why retailers, through their supply chain management, need to work towards mitigating such impact, here are some alarming figures. Firstly, almost 15% of total global greenhouse gas emissions originate from industrial livestock farming. Moreover, 18% of the emissions directly result from food supply chains, in which 11% of them come from transporting the food. These are called food miles. Every day, foods are transported into the UK through water, land, and air. Transporting the food within the UK produces 19 million tonnes of CO2 annually, equivalent to around 5.5 million typical cars. The amount of carbon emissions coming from food production and transportation makes it important for organisations to act and find ways to reduce the carbon emissions in their supply chain. We shall now outline the key issues in regards to firms tackling carbon emissions. The first of these is that there is outdated equipment that provides irresponsible levels of carbon emissions. Only recently have technologies become available that significantly reduce carbon emissions. The Goss brewery in Austria, however, has become fully carbon neutral. A KMPG report details that their energy supply is now 100% based on renewable energy, and CO2 emissions from fossil fuels will be zero. This impressive goal has been achieved thanks to new technologies such as electricity from hydropower, biomass district heating, solar thermal energy, and renewable energy from the newly built beer grain fermentation plant by BDI, Bioenergy International. The key takeaway here is that significant upgrades and investments would be needed for current operations within food supply chains to achieve similar emission reduction goals. The next issue that follows is that there is a correlation between moving towards sustainable production and incurring an increased cost. For example, upgrading to more carbon-friendly equipment would be a costly endeavour for any firm at any level in the supply chain. Another example is choosing multiple sourcing over single sourcing, which would almost always increase costs, yet it moves firms closer towards responsible production, as will be discussed later. This brings us to the next issue, a lack of consumer awareness towards buying responsible produced products. Where there ceases to be a demand in the market, This equates to there being no incentive for firms to supply such products. Furthermore, where demand does exist in certain demographics, such as a study from Nielsen showing that 72% of Generation Z would pay more for a product that is sustainable, this then acts as a significant accelerant towards firms committing to, and often promoting, responsible production, in which demand should cover costs incurred from such production. Ultimately, the issue that there is a lack of demand in large parts of the market. This means the customer at any point in the supply chain will not be willing to pay the price difference from additional costs that are incurred from firms switching to a more responsible production. Even where there is significantly higher demand, this may only equate to a fraction of a firm's sales, as the firms are unlikely to commit to a higher cost across its products. This is the main barrier for firms becoming more responsible, as without a significant demand for such products, firms would struggle to account for the majority of additional costs.
The second issue we'll discuss is food wastage. This is a serious issue highlighted by both the UN and academia, which can be illustrated by the following facts and figures. As you can see on the slide, roughly 1/3 of the food produced in the world for human consumption every year gets wasted. A figure in the context of more upstream food loss is that globally, 14% of food produced gets lost between harvest and retail, and this number increases to 20% for fruit and vegetables. This all leads to the fact that even if just 1/4 of the food currently lost or wasted globally could be saved, it would be enough to feed 870 million hungry people in the world. These facts and figures are problematic because food loss and waste amounts to a major squandering of resources, including water, land, energy, labour, and capital, and needlessly produces greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to global warming and climate change. Reducing food waste and loss throughout the whole food supply chain is therefore not only desirable for targets 12.2, 3, and 5, but is also desirable for the sake of multiple SDGs. Moving on to the key causes of food wastage at the retailer level. According to our research, food wastage occurs mainly because of three reasons. Firstly, a variability in demand here is relevant because in order to not run out of stock, retailers end up ordering quantities that are greater than needed, resulting from unknown demand and forecasting challenges. These challenges stem from, for example, seasonality, weather patterns, and local competition influencing the ability to forecast demand correctly. When retailers then cannot sell the food stocked in time, they end up wasting vast amounts of food. This brings us to our second point on the slide, which is related to the short shelf life of food products. This point is relevant because retailers end up discarding high amounts of food that has passed the use by date, even if this date is not an accurate indication of quality. Therefore, food that could still be eaten gets wasted as retailers often don't find a way to reuse the products, but if they did, they'd be contributing towards target 12.5. Lastly, high amounts of food loss up to the point in which food arrives at the retail level of the food supply chain is relevant because it relates directly to targets 12.3 and 5.
We shall now present possible solutions to these issues. First, we shall focus on the more general solutions for target 12.2 in relation to carbon emissions. However, it should be noted that as carbon emissions are an overarching issue within the food industry, some of these solutions will be applicable in helping deal with a wider range of issues such as food waste. The first solution we will discuss is for larger firms with strong financial capabilities to engage in upstream vertical integration. Vertical integration may not be possible for most firms due to a lack of resources such as capital. However, it is perhaps the most efficient way to take control upstream of the supply chain and demonstrate stewardship for the wider industry. A general example of vertical integration being pursued for this reason is by Tiffany, who use vertical integration to ensure optimal control over the supply of diamonds to minimize the risk of their product using blood diamonds. Although costs may occur from investing in responsible production methods when integrating, Integration will bring the firm closer to achieving economies of scale, and so profit killing costs will be less of a concern. Integration will also make a firm more responsible for its actions, which means that the firm will be more likely to have a commitment to responsible production in its decision making process. This is due to wider social pressures in an ever growing sustainable world. However, by being industry leaders, firms would be wise to take advantage of getting ahead of the curve where they can. This has been recognised by Nando's CEO for the UK and Ireland, where he states that the firm are particularly proud that they will become the first in the industry to combine improvements in environmental sustainability with animal welfare. Furthermore, as recently noted in the Harvard Business Review, in the future, sustainability will simply be how business is done. This reinforces the idea that firms must engage in any viable opportunity to gain control over its production being sustainable. The next solution to be discussed is multiple sourcing. For small firms, multiple sourcing can help to reduce food miles by engaging with multiple locally sourced supply. This will not only help reduce carbon emissions but increase customer engagement. For example, in places such as Britain, consumers are passionate about buying locally sourced produce. A YouGov study shows 79% of British adults think it's important to buy local produce. This shows a way for small firms to make responsible production profitable. It also demonstrates a potential way to entice customers to learning about products, leading to the development of a responsible consumer along with an increase in demand. Multiple sourcing for medium to large firms means that there is more availability and less dictation from suppliers. Where one supplier may achieve very low cost due to irresponsible production methods, firms tend to be stuck in long contracts with exclusivity deals with these sort of providers to lower their own costs. These suppliers may have further monopoly over supply as they may source to multiple large firms, which also creates barriers to entry for new, smaller, sustainable suppliers. Engaging upstream with multiple suppliers and manufacturers means there is less reliability on suppliers and more flexibility to customers. This also equates to being able to use multiple sustainable suppliers with different sustainable focuses. For example, Nando's has admitted its supplier was struggling to commit to low carbon emissions simultaneously with ethical livestock farming. Using this example, we can understand why firms that use multiple suppliers for a range of products can be more efficient in their approach to SDG 12. By firms using different suppliers for products, they can become more efficient in their responsible sourcing if each supplier has the most relevant responsible production methods for each given product they supply. Finally, as multiple sourcing puts more accountability on the firm, this incentivizes them to be as responsible as possible. With single sourcing, responsibility is placed closer towards the supplier.
After having looked at some more generalised supply chain management solutions, now we will turn our focus to specific management practices that can help with targets 12.3 and 5. Before we look at ways to better contribute towards reducing food waste and or preventing food loss, we just want to mention that as our diagram demonstrates, we recognise that only waste occurs at the retailer and consumer levels, with food loss occurring further upstream. However, that is not to say that retailers cannot help to mitigate food loss. To reduce food wastage, we suggest two main solutions: supply chain collaboration and surplus food redistribution using digital applications and through partnerships with charities. As we have already touched upon vertical integration, it's important to make it clear that here, by supply chain collaboration, we are instead, as defined by Bowersox et al., referring to the formation of close, long-term relationships where supply chain members work together and share information and resources to accomplish mutual objectives. As highlighted by Simatupang and Didrahan in 2005, supply chain collaboration used to be less focused on relational communication and knowledge creation, but this is an intrinsic element for the reduction of food wastage. Although, as Fawcett et al. Point out, it's not at all easy to establish dynamic supply chain collaboration capabilities, there are numerous examples of how collaborative working has effectively reduced food loss. For example, Unilever's North Sustainability Partnership, in which they worked collaboratively with farmers and provided them with the technology to measure soil moisture to avoid under or overwatering, which without this technology would have resulted in food loss at harvest. Another example would be Asda's project with their supplier Greencore. As a result of 30% of soup previously ending up as food waste on arrival, they collaboratively developed a unique transit tray for soup distribution to replace the corrugated outer, thus successfully preventing waste. Another aspect of supply chain collaboration, as reiterated by Suring and Muller, is cooperation. Food retailers can help to prevent food loss upstream through being flexible in their agreements with their suppliers. For example, in the case of Aldi, the flexing of their agreements to temporarily increase their packaging size for a supplier's product due to a surplus harvest helped prevent 30 tonnes of potential food waste in 2019. Another example of this was Tesco's, who, through simply broadening product specification to create their perfectly imperfect range of fruit and vegetables, maximised suppliers' harvest, saving over 20,000 tonnes of food going to waste. Aside from this, supply chain collaboration also implies an element of information sharing, defined by Angeles and Nath alongside various other academics as sharing relevant, accurate, complete, and confidential information. Lee adds to this and suggests that the information needs to be done in real time, which, as Best et al. Points out, in the 21st century results in needing to be technically integrated. As researched by Kinsey and Ashman, retailers need to take advantage of their point-of-sale scanner data to increase supply chain efficiency and, more importantly, to mitigate food waste. In order to do this, retailers should consider implementing customer loyalty programs, as having access to this customer-centric information increases the accuracy of forecasting and enables, in theory, the ability for the continuous replenishment of products. An example of this functioning in practice would be Tesco's, who through their customer loyalty scheme and updated IT systems have managed to adapt and optimize their supply chain to better forecast purchasing trends and habits. This theory is further supported by Verghese et al. As well as Chauhan. With regards to surplus food redistribution as a solution to food wastage, we mainly suggest the use of digital applications that maximize the selling of about to go out of date foods and partnerships with charities. As mentioned by Hermsdorf, Rombach, and Bisch, the redistribution of surplus food for charitable purposes is already an established practice within European retail. Therefore, for larger retailers who are already involved in charitable partnerships, a solution to surplus food could be utilizing digital applications. These applications make it more accessible for consumers to purchase food which would otherwise become waste at the end of the retail working day. An example of this, as highlighted by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, is the application Too Good To Go, which with the help of over 20,000 supermarkets has managed to save over 20 million meals from going to waste. For smaller retailers, a solution to surplus food could be forming partnerships with charitable food redistributors such as FareShare, the UK's national network of charitable food distributors. Working alongside 18 businesses, including the UK's major supermarkets, the charity has saved a whopping £14.1 million of food from going to waste. Thank you for listening, and here are our references.